I'm Brian Special, and this is the Grand Canyon Hiker Dude Show presented by Bright Angel Outfitters. All right, if you ever go to one of the Grand Canyon groups on Facebook, it's an almost certainty that Benedict Dugoff is the man behind your experience. That's because Benedict runs a network of groups focusing on topics like general hiking, rim-to-rim, transportation, training, planning. The list goes on and on. There are 9 groups and counting. The Grand Canyon Hikers and Grand Canyon Rim-to-Rim groups are the most popular, with nearly 100,000 members each. In total, there are right around 300,000 members across all of Benedict's groups, and maintaining them alongside his moderators is a serious undertaking that he happily takes on from his home almost 2,000 miles away in the Great Smoky Mountain region of North Carolina.
One of the remarkable things that obviously I didn't realize but learned over the years is that there's a lot going on under the hood, for example, of these Facebook groups. And it needs daily 24/7 care. I think what brings me one of the most satisfaction is being able to have something that runs smoothly so that people don't have to think about it and they can actually focus on their upcoming Grand Canyon adventure. You know, on the one hand, we all, I think as human beings, we like appreciation, but for me, I keep thinking the greatest appreciation is a smoothly run group where people can connect and interact with each other and help. And so it's not about me, right? And it is truly about the community.
In speaking with Benedict, it doesn't take long to figure out that he's all about doing things the right way. There's little he won't do to make sure his Facebook community stays clean of spam and sales pitches and remains focused on helping users uncover the nuggets of information and inspiration that his network has become known for. It's all rooted in a love for the outdoors that started on a family vacation he took as a young boy growing up in the Netherlands.
We went to England and to the north to Scotland. And I saw mountains for the first time. And the crazy thing, Brian, it's like all my body wanted to do was like run up the mountains. You know, I was a wee lad. And I was just like, wow, mountains. And there was a love that sparked of the great outdoors. And then after I moved to the US myself, and then ended up in the West and the Southwest, I remember in the late 90s going to the Grand Canyon for the first time, and I looked over the rim and I felt like I was in some oversized alternate reality, right? Everything usually that you see is, I mean, when you see a mountain in the distance, I mean, it looks big, you know, and it goes up. And you come to the rim and you look over the rim and you go, whoa, wow. Because you're looking down into something that is just so beyond human-sized that your brain, especially initially, it just can't comprehend it. You know, your jaw drops and you don't really know. There's no proportion to compare it to, right? And so that sparked an interest. I was, all my life been very active, athletic, into outdoors. And then you see some of these signs that the NPS has, which says, be very careful, don't hike very much, stay close to the rim. And then the next time I came back and I started learning a little bit more about the trails, the message that actually stuck with me was this sign that essentially insinuated if you're going to go hike down to the bottom and back in one day, you're going to die. And I was like, wow, this must be, if nothing else, it did instill, I think, a healthy sense of respect and reverence. Even though...
But at the same time, you saw that and you're like, oh, I've got to do it now.
Exactly. Me as an athlete and having scaled some mountains, I back in the early 2000s, I did Mount Rainier twice. when I was still living in Seattle, and that was quite a feat. I played in my 20s and 30s. I'd played like full soccer matches 2-3 times a week, like running for 90 minutes straight, and I mean I was in really good shape. So I thought, well, I mean, is that really meant for me? Or so yeah, I was curious. And then in 2012, when I was living in Tucson, Arizona at the time, me and two buddies, we drove up, and we had decided, this was the spring, end of April, that we were going to go down to Phantom Ranch, to the river, and back up that day. Remember getting to the rim, and this really was the first time. So you have to imagine, I'd seen the canyon at least 10 years earlier, but perhaps, this message of no, you're not supposed to go very far down. I wanted to make sure that I was well prepared and that I was really fit enough for it. So I think, looking back, I really did take that to heart. What the NPS recommendations, the Park Service.
How old were you at this point?
I was 42.
So, decades after first laying eyes on the canyon, Benedict was finally ready to descend below the rim, with a plan for a full rim-to-river adventure that would follow the traditional route of South Kaibab to Phantom Ranch to Bright Angel. It's an experience that would change his life.
At South Kaibab Trail, the first section is called the Chimney, and it's this section of relatively short switchbacks that almost defy gravity. They're kind of like cut into this part of canyon wall. Before you know it, you're a couple hundred feet below the rim, and then it starts flattening out a little bit, but it continues to go down. And it literally felt like what I remembered from a decade earlier, when I was wondering, well, what is it like once you get below the rim? And to me, it's always felt like you're stepping into a different world. You still have the sky above you, everything kind of normal, but you're like in something. And I've always felt it really strongly. I mean, and still every time. And the other thing I felt was, so two other things, was a sense of exhilaration. I would say in part of that is because you're going down. Like, the canyon is a magnet. You're literally, and whether you want to call it gravity or easy down, you're literally getting pulled in. And your brain does not think about the fact that you then have to go back up, and that it's going to be 2 or 3 times as difficult going back up. And I've seen this with thousands of people. I mean, coming across people on the trails, walking down, including in flip-flops, and with no water, or, with one of these little plastic bottles or so. And I look at them and I go, yeah, you got stung by the bug, by the downhill bug, and by the beauty, and you're just getting pulled in. But do you realize you still have to go up?
Well, we've heard Benedict talk a lot about the warning signs the Park Service puts up in the Grand Canyon. And the most famous of those is of the iconic Victor Vomit, which is an illustration of a man overcome by heat, shirtless and on all fours as he violently vomits. Yes, it's a serious warning, but it's also quite the memorable image, which is why we've turned it into a t-shirt. If you go to brightangeloutfitters.com, you'll find the Don't Be a Vic tee, along with plenty of other tees and sweatshirts and hoodies with Grand Canyon hiking themes, including our new Rim to Rim collection. Find it all at the site that makes this podcast possible, brightangeloutfitters.com. All right, back to the story of Benedict Dugoff as he continues his transformational journey below the rim.
There was a sense of, like, I'm home. I've arrived. as far as a nature setting, right? Like, this is like, it's home. Like, I belong here. And I had not expected that. I didn't realize that was going to happen. I knew it was going to be epic and interesting, and I'd been on a lot of trails before, but this sense of home, of comfort, like instantly, right? I had never been down on the South Kaibab Trail. We're trotting, we're trail running, we're hiking, we're stopping, we're taking pictures, we're taking it all in. And then when you get all the way down, suddenly you find yourself in front of a tunnel, and that's a whole other experience, like a tunnel. And you have to, that felt a bit like an initiation. Like, you have to go through this tunnel, which interestingly enough curves a little bit. So you can't, when you stand at the beginning, you cannot see the light at the other side. So you literally have to go into the dark. It's not a very long tunnel, but you go into the dark, and then it curves a bit, and then you see the bridge, and you get to the Black Bridge. And this is the bridge that people take. This is where all the mules go over. And you realize, you've seen the Colorado River from above, that it's much bigger than what you had in mind. And you go across and you hear it, and you get to the other side, and now it's like, wow, I'm on the North Rim side, right? And so what we did is we continued on a short while to Phantom Ranch. And Phantom Ranch, obviously, primarily is a place where people stay overnight, but they also have a canteen where you can buy snacks, coffee, bagels, lemonade. And we had we'd brought kind of a breakfast, so we grabbed a picnic table and we sat there, and we were just marveling at what we had experienced. But we also knew that the big part, the hard climb, was coming up. And so from Phantom Ranch, we took Bright Angel back up, which is just about exactly 10 miles. And so we were excited. We, kind of trotted a bit to the river. We took the other bridge, the Silver Bridge. And then, man, I was so excited at that point, Brian, that I decided I was going to challenge myself, and I was going to see how quick can I get up to the top. And so I pushed myself, right? Like I ran when I could. I walked fast when I could. I was like pushing. And I made it up. I remember timing it in 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Whoa.
From the bottom. I remember getting to the top, and I was completely worn out, but very exhilarated and exhilarated. And that last section, and then you see the trail sign, and you're like, yeah, I made it. And I remember just like jumping up in the air and screaming, and people looking at me, but not that strangely. I think people, and they said, wow, well, what happened? It's like, well, we just went to the bottom and back. And what? Wait a second, you went to the bottom, and didn't you see that sign? You're not supposed to do that? And it's like, well, it worked out great. And then I left my buddies behind, and they caught up a little while later. And, the other part then is you kind of have your post-hike, post-run rituals. You've, for one, there is an amazing little ice cream shop just about 200 yards east from the trailhead, right by the Bright Angel Lodge. So if it's hot and during the day you get ice cream, there have been many, many times that I've struggled to that last part of Bright Angel, going up even like around sunset or even after sunset. And I was just visualizing the big pizzas at the Maswig Lodge Pizzeria, and trying to make sure to get there before 10 p.m.
Motivation.
Yeah. So, you know what? Once I'd done that, I knew
you were hooked.
I was hooked, and I knew that I could do. After that, I knew that I could do a rim to rim, and I could probably do a rim to rim to rim in a day. And so I did my first rim to rim to rim in a day. So this was end April. I did it end September that same year in 2012. Once I did that one, I was absolutely totally hooked. And one of the reasons that I went straight to a rim to rim to rim is because the classic logistics of just doing a single rim to rim they were a pain in the butt back then. They're still a pain in the butt. It just takes a lot. And so I was blessed and fortunate to be fit enough and well prepared enough to be able to start on one side, go to the other side, and come back and do it that way.
Even after conquering the rim to rim to rim hike, Benedict wanted more. So he set out on a quadruple crossing, a hike that we discussed in detail with Benedict's friend, Coach Arnie, in a previous episode. Along the way, Benedict began acquiring the lessons that would one day serve him in his mission to help those in his Facebook community complete their own bucket list hikes. This particular R5 was more difficult than he thought it would be.
They definitely were a stretch, a challenge. In a lot of ways that I did not encounter on a single rim to rim to rim. And maybe it's something for another conversation to go into these specifically. But yeah, my rule of thumb is, and I would recommend this to anyone, is make sure that you're, and maybe a different word than comfortably capable, but competently capable of doing more than whatever the distance and the challenge of the canyon requires. And I think that's how you keep yourself from getting into trouble.
But how do people know that? Like someone who's coming out and they've never seen the canyon before, they think they've trained for it perhaps, but
yeah.
they're probably unsure until they get there and they're actually doing it. When do you think people would actually know that they're ready to do something like rim to rim?
Well, it is ideally, I would say, move to Arizona and go train there and live not too far away and start doing it in little chunks, in sections, right? I think my advice would be, if you're really going to respect the canyon and want to get the most out of it, don't plan on a one-off. Like really plan, just like tree rings, right? You have a small one in the middle and then you get bigger and bigger. So go to the canyon and, I mean, you know what you're capable of, right? Do something that feels not too difficult. So for example, if you think you may be able to do a rim to rim, well, maybe go there and do a rim to river, right? Or do a down South Kaibab across the Tonto and up. And in other words, have the experience of how hard it is to go back up, at the end of your hike or trail run or so. Like get a reality dose. Like really do something that you think is comfortable or maybe not too difficult and still get smacked around by the canyon, right? And that gives you a baseline point, and then go back and go train, right? Go train your butt off. Go do the things that are going to make you fitter and stronger. The other thing you need in the canyon is unique, right? You need experience. There's lots of idiosyncrasies. There's lots of some, if you want to call them little things that can trip you up. And so, experience some of that. Have some struggle, right? Learn how to deal with that. How are you gonna handle the struggle? How are you gonna adjust in the moment? What are you gonna do if, it's April and you think, oh, it's just spring, but turns out to be 100-degree day, and all you have is water, and you've been drinking water religiously, but now you're starting to get hyponatremia. Right? And you're like, oh, I'm just going to make it to the next stop, right? Well, is that really the thing to do in that moment? The other thing I love about the canyon is it's one of these few places for most urban people to get a taste of some wilderness, to get a taste of the rawness of nature. I think for most people, and this is what's beautiful, we call them the corridor trails, right? And that's what we're talking about when we're doing a rim to rim or rim to rim to rim. The Park Service even designates it as non-wilderness developed areas. So technically, this is not even wilderness, right? And they've put pit and composting toilets every couple of miles, and you find water spigots, and the trails are well maintained, and they're always being repaired. And so you have this opportunity to go to the Grand Canyon and get a taste, right? Even if you're staying on these civilized trails, we can get a taste of the canyon. We can get a taste of that wilderness, a taste of that rawness, taste of that challenge on these particular trails. And I love that. I love that there's places in this country where we can do that.
In 2013, inspired by his canyon adventures and driven to help others have similar experiences, the first of Benedict's Facebook groups was born. The mission has never changed.
I think as you hike and explore the trails more and more, at least for me, the gift of the canyon, it calls for a way to reciprocate and to start giving back, right? And so the canyon gives, and if you're blessed to have these experiences and make it out in one piece every time, then it makes you feel like you want to give back. And you can do that by helping other people.
Let's address some of the most common things that we hear in the Facebook communities when it comes to rim to rim. And the first one, I see this almost every day. Which direction do I go? Do I go north to south? Do I go south to north? And the consensus seems to be that you go north to south because it's a longer, more gradual descent from the north rim to the river. And then, it's 4,400 feet up Bright Angel or 4,800 feet up South Kaibab. I'm going to kind of turn that one on its head, and I'm curious what you think, because I find it easier going up North Kaibab. And here's the reason why. Mm-hmm. It feels to me like the North Kaibab ascent doesn't start until you get to Manzanita. Mm-hmm. And by the time you get to Manzanita, you've got 5.4 miles to go, and you've already ascended. By the time you get there, you've already ascended about 2,000 feet. Mm-hmm. And you have about 3,400 feet to go by the time you get to Manzanita and the climb really begins. So I always feel like it's easier to go up the north side than it is the south side, because the south side, when you get to the river and you start going up either North Kaibab or Bright Angel, especially South Kaibab, you are climbing immediately, and it doesn't let up the whole way. So I'm curious what you think the best way for someone who's never been in the canyon to go rim to rim is.
This question really does make me chuckle, because anyone can come up with so many different arguments.
Sure. For
what direction is better. And what makes me chuckle, and by the way, I would say going up South Kaibab is one of the most relentless ascents of all the trails, that I've crisscrossed, including in my ultra marathons and others in other parts. There's something, if you're not in good order, it's almost like soul crushing. Like it just keeps going and going, and you look up and it doesn't stop. And you literally have to go into a meditation of one step at a time. Otherwise you just start crying on the trail.
That's what I call those gigantic steps. I call them soul crushers. That's exactly what they are in South Kaibab.
Those and all those water bars and so what I find interesting is that if I take a step back and which direction to go, I would say that the differences actually are marginal, meaning whether you go north to south or south to north, one way that I would describe it, it's 90 to 95% the same.
Yeah.
Meaning the amount of time you're going to spend doing it. Okay, so if you're going up the north side, you may have one extra 1,000 feet of climbing. Okay, but then again, if you go up the south side, you may have more sections that are steeper, perhaps, or prolonged, or so. At the end of the day, the answer, if somebody says, which way should I go, north and south? My answer is both. Pick, and, one time go north to south, and the other time go south to north. And why am I saying it? Is because I think people get fixated on the wrong thing. The right thing is it's all about the experience. It's about you being in the canyon, having, let's say, 12 priceless hours of hiking from one side to the other, and having this, in some case, life-changing experience. Like, beyond that, who cares, right? Whether you go this way or that way, like, are you really, why? And I feel like the more people obsess about things like this, the more they get out of the experience, out of the moment. They're trying to optimize the wrong thing, if that makes any sense.
I think
right?
that's a good way to look at it because, like you said, it's marginal. It is marginal no matter which direction you choose. So maybe the answer is wherever you can get a hotel room.
Well, I was just going to get to that. Is that the humbling thing is that it's not going to be, in most people's cases, unless they're very fortunate, it's not going to be the direction that they're going to choose based on water stations or, amount of feet of climbing or all of that. It's a lot more mundane than that. It's where are you going to be able to get lodging on either side of the rim? How is your transportation going to work out? Right? How many days do you have for your trip? Where, unless you're local, are you flying in and out of? Right? These are actually the real world questions that you're going to have to answer and find solution for it. Now, in many cases, these logistic questions are actually going to determine which direction you're going to go. So you don't even have to worry about it. You just go with the direction that you're fortunate enough to get your lodging, your transportation with. Right? So that's the second part of why I think it's in some ways it's even a non-question. Like you may not even have a choice.
What are some of the other most common questions that you see in the Facebook communities when it comes to rim to rim?
A lot of people are under the impression that it's really easy to find camping spots or reservations at Phantom Ranch. So they come into the group and they may ask a question, say, hey, I want to do rim to rim, I'd like to do it over 3 days, and I got my flight planned and everything else. And then they get the bad news, which is it's a lottery to get a camping spot. Phantom Ranch is also a lottery. And I tell people is you should expect not to be able to get camping spots or lodging at Phantom Ranch for your rim to rim. If you get it, it's a bonus, wonderful. But expect to have to do it in a single day. And people are not prepared, right? They're also not ready. They either think they're not ready or they're not trained enough to do it all in a single day. So they set themselves up with an expectation of something that is not just, so now we're not talking about the physical preparation here, but logistically, it's very likely not going to happen that they're going to be able to get camping or lodging below the rim. So we see that a lot too. And so they have to make a decision, right? Are they going to go do a single day rim to rim, or are they just going to have to scrap the whole thing altogether?
Benedict knows preparing for Grand Canyon hikes like rim to rim can be overwhelming. There are so many logistics to worry about, and missing just a simple detail can ultimately ruin your experience. Now, while it's certainly possible to plan a successful trip through all of the free information gleaned from the Facebook community, Benedict knows that some people want more, which is why he offers more of a turnkey service to those who want to make sure they get everything just right.
What I like to do is help people get ready so that they can have their own best possible Grand Canyon experience. And I'm not offering any guided hikes or tours or trips. But what I do right now is coaching and consulting. And practically speaking, that would be trip planning and training, right? So if you or your group is looking to optimize their trip, make sure to do it right, do it safely, have an experience that you'll remember the rest of your life. I do custom programs, and or something as simple as a phone call or two, and we just talk about it. And I really enjoy doing that because I believe that the difference is made beforehand. That's where all the difference is made. Once you're in the canyon, you're on your own. You gotta figure it out. But with the right kind of preparation, you set yourself up for success.
What is it, Benedict, that you get out of running these Facebook groups and being the godfather, I guess, of rim to rim and Grand Canyon information? It's a pretty big responsibility, really.
I think for me, where I directed is a if you want to call it an attitude and a mission of paying forward what I believe the canyon has given me. And I'd like to do that from a perspective of promoting and supporting responsible and respectful, recreation on the canyon trails. And so what I see is I see these communities as a wonderful place to further foster that perspective. The second thing is what I realize is that in many cases, the number one difference in someone's canyon experience and canyon trail experience, including from a perspective of safety, but also enjoyment, is their level of preparation. One thing I noticed in the last 10 years is that even though the National Park Service website has a ton of information, and I go there all the time myself, somehow people are not relying on a website, and information does not seem to be enough for most people. They want an interactive experience. They want the information, they want inspiration, but they want it in a more interactive way. And I think this is where communities like, for example, here on Facebook come in. If people can, there's kind of a joke, and sometimes people get snarky in the comments, and they put the comment, "Let me Google that," in there for somebody who's asking a question. And of course, technically that could be correct, but I think they missed the point. And the point is that people are looking not just for the information, but they're looking for interaction. So by, creating, building, having communities in these formats, we can reach hundreds of thousands of people. We can have a setup where people that have experience and have been there before and have had good and struggling experiences and have learned something can be there to help all the new people that come in. And anecdotally, I also want to mention that I believe that the majority of people that do rim to rim are first timers, and that the majority of rim to rim hikes are one-offs. And it's not because people don't want to come back, but it's a big deal. You know, a lot of people have to fly in. It's expensive. You have to take time off. For a lot of people, there's a lot of, there's training and preparation involved. And so they really have this one-off experience. And what does that mean for our communities and groups? It means that we're constantly having new people come in. And, if you've been in the groups for a long time, it could feel like Groundhog Day, right? It's like, well, I've seen this question 100 times before. Well, yeah, you have. But for this person, they haven't seen, this is the first time they're thinking about it. And it's the most important thing in the world they can think of with regard to their Grand Canyon trip. And it means a lot, right? And so for them, it's a really big deal. And I think this is what keeps me going too, is that we're not just dealing with, it's not you and I and my friend Arnie and a bunch of veterans who, we're reminiscing about all our stuff that we've done the last decade or so. No, it really is the impulse of new people every day that obviously inspires me too, but it also comes with a sense of responsibility of, well, if I'm not doing it, where are these people going to go?
That is Benedict Dugoff. If you'd like to get in touch with him, he says the best way, of course, is by sending him a message through one of his Facebook groups. You can also email him at canyoncoachingaz@gmail.com. That's canyoncoachingaz@gmail.com. His contact information and all of his Grand Canyon groups can be found in the show notes. In fact, we list his Facebook groups in all of our episode show notes because we believe that strongly in the value they provide to the Grand Canyon hiking community. By the way, Benedict's next canyon dream, taking his first river trip, but with one requirement, that there's plenty of time set aside for more hiking. Folks, if you're enjoying these episodes, we sure would appreciate a rating and a review on Apple, Spotify, or whatever platform you're listening on. That helps us get this information to more people that we hope it can help. You can also find us across social media, including an active YouTube channel with a growing library of videos aimed at helping you on your canyon adventures. And please check out BrightAngelOutfitters.com for all kinds of fun apparel built around the Grand Canyon hiking community. From Victor Vomit to Ribbon Falls to Devil's Corkscrew, you will find designs not available anywhere else on Earth. My name is Brian Special, encouraging you, as always, to go hike the canyon. Take that first step, embrace the journey, and when you do get there, just hike your own hike. We'll see you next time on the Grand Canyon Hiker Dude Show, presented by Bright Angel Outfitters.